to RT.com, find out more details about the man who actually once turned into a taxi driver just to win votes in his homeland. For now, on RT International, Washington hopes the upcoming presidential election in Afghanistan will stand the test of democracy, as it's critical to sustaining international support for the country. Currently, Kabul is financially backed by the White House with billions of dollars streamed into the Islamic State. They say it's needed to improve infrastructure and living conditions after the US-led occupation. But the latest auditing reports say most of this cash is being wasted or swallowed by corruption. RT's Lucy Kafanoff assesses the results.
The United States has spent more than $2 billion on road and highway construction here in Afghanistan, but the project that was supposed to be a symbol of hope is now falling apart, and too many areas look something like this. Now, we are here in Kabul, but across the country, more than 10,000 miles of roads and highways constructed by Western donors have fallen apart because of overuse. Others have been shredded by explosives laid down by insurgents. What's more, the Afghan government is unable to maintain even a fraction of what's been constructed since 2001. At the end of this year, America's longest war will officially come to an end. Since the start of combat operations, the U.S. spent close to $100 billion to help rebuild Afghanistan. Many of the projects were well-intentioned, and some certainly did help improve lives. But much of that spending has helped fuel corruption and waste, and a lot of the money has simply disappeared unaccounted for. At least 19 hospitals constructed by the international community may be too expensive for Afghanistan to run. In other cases, it's difficult to see just where the money has gone. At least one U.S.-funded hospital in Afghanistan's Karwan province cost taxpayers $600,000. But it is so poorly constructed that doctors have been forced to wash infants in untreated river water. There's mold and mildew throughout the facility, barely any equipment, and just enough electricity to power a handful of light bulbs. Because literacy is vital to any modern military or police force, the U.S. added classes to its basic training of Afghan soldiers. The program was meant to ensure all new recruits were able to count, write their own name, but despite $200 million spent on the program, more than half of Afghan forces remain illiterate. But what about the massive military headquarters the size of 2 football fields and no one left to use it? In Helmand province, the Defense Department spent $34 million on a building that comes with all the tools to wage a modern war. A vast operations center with tiered seating, a briefing theater. The Western forces have been busy packing up and withdrawing from the area. The facility has never been occupied and will likely be torn down without ever having been used. Now, Washington's strategy in Afghanistan relied heavily on spending more money, more on bigger and quicker projects, a so-called civilian surge to win hearts and minds. Yet much of the spending simply fueled corruption or left the country heavily dependent on foreign aid, leaving many here wondering what will happen to their country once the Westerners and their dollars go home. Reporting in Kabul for RT, I'm Lucy Kafanoff.
And as the presidential elections in Afghanistan draw closer, Taliban groups have now intensified their attempts to disrupt the vote. One of the candidates has been kidnapped by Islamists. That follows an attack on the Afghan election headquarters last week. Journalist Jonathan Steele from the Guardian newspaper, he says that years of military operations have done very little to break the Taliban's resolve.
There will be inevitably some loss of territory to the Taliban after 2014. I mean, the Afghan security forces are taking a huge toll of death and injury in the last few weeks and months. Very, very high levels of casualty, much more than NATO itself was suffering. So that's a clear indication that both the Taliban are fighting hard still, and that the Afghan security forces are just not able to deal with them properly.
And of course, we are keeping a very close eye on the upcoming elections in Afghanistan. Lucy Kafanoff is there. She'll bring us a series of reports on the future of the country and how it might change after the vote.